本日はお忙しいところ、NEC ビジョナリーウィーク2021にご参加くださり、誠にありがとうございます。それでは、これより、ウェルビーイングな未来の実現、デジタル活用の課題と展望について、キーノートセッションを始めます。はじめに、登壇者をご紹介いたします。台湾デジタル大臣、ソーシャルイノベーション担当、オードリー・タン様です。
Hello and good local time.
そして NEC 取締役会長、遠藤信弘です。
NEC の遠藤です。今日は大変良い機会をいただきました。心よ感謝申し上げます。よろしくお願いいたします。
それではキーノートセッションを始めます。オードリー、まずはスピーチをよろしくお願いいたします。
Hello everyone. I'm really happy to take this opportunity to first thank the NEC for arranging this conversation and also to highlight the importance of well-being. Indeed, I often say that while IT connects machines to machines, we who work in digital must connect people with people. And it is through the digital technology that the two of us are connected today. And I believe that the key to well-being is connectedness, both within oneself to connect well with one's own emotions and one's own health and body and so on, but also interpersonally to connect to an international community who care about the common future, about sustainability, prosperity, and so on. So whenever the digital technologies is used to connect people this way, I call this assistive intelligence. It's still AI, but it serves purely to further the well-being of the society and communities. And if people, instead of getting connected, rather are left disconnected by technologies into solitude, into loneliness, into being blocked, or even this idea that the internet is no longer a pro-social space, but rather an anti-social space and so on, and that will be not healthy and it will be ill-being. And I call this authoritarian intelligence. It's still AI, but this is basically taking the power from the individuals into a centralized communication device. So our work in the digital technology is to empower the individuals to get well connected and therefore realize well-being. And I look forward to explore this theme of well-being with you.
はい、ありがとうございます。私自身もそのように思います。COVID-19 で、テレワーク等も含めて新たな習慣というものが我々の中に入ってまいりましたけども、この習慣の中で一番私は重要だなと思うようになったのは、一人一人の、個の尊重っていうものがとっても大切になってきたなと。で私どもはそのインダストリーにおりますから価値創造というのが非常に大きな我々の役目で、人間社会に対する価値創造というのはとても大きな役目であるわけですけれども、その価値を創造するのは基本的には我々人間そのものが価値を創造し、そして人間社会に大きな貢献をしたいというそういう思いを持ってするというのが我々の活動なんだと思っています。ただそれが企業の中で価値を起こすということはその通りなんですけれども、企業の中で一人一人の個の尊重をしながら価値を作り上げていくということがとても大切になってくるし、結局はそれが社会全体の中で個のつながりを持ちながら、この個が尊重されて価値を作り上げて、そして人間社会に対するサステナビリティ、持続性に対するその価値を作り上げていくということがとても大切なんだと思います。その一連の動きそのものがまずウェルビーイングのとても重要な活動であると私は認識しておりまして、そういう意味では今まさにオードリーさんがおっしゃったこと、本当にその通りだと私も思っております。
Definitely, and I would like also to extend this metaphor somewhat. Within a large company, for example, it's not just the employees and staff internal to the company, but also the entire supply chain. Instead of treating users as just users, they are valued customers who can co-create new values together as well. In Taiwan, I call myself digital minister, working with the government, not for the government, working with the people, not for the the people to epitomize this idea of democracy. So instead of treating citizens as just users, they are innovative partners who can see a new need, for example, and prototype a new solution. Instead of making arbitrary distinctions between civic tech from the people and government tech from the government, we fuse them together into a shared community where the prototypes by the citizens are promoted into government scale innovations for the entire country, sometimes within just 2 or 3 days. So this open innovation, I believe, is also key for a large enterprise or a large government, as it may be, to promote the connection between intrapreneurs, people who start new things from the inside, and entrepreneurs, people who start things from the outside.
まさにこれからウェルビーイングも含めてでございますけれども、いろいろな社会問題、例えばエネルギーの問題とか地球の環境の問題、こういうものも我々人間社会のサステナビリティにとって大きな課題になってきています。でこういうエネルギーの問題とか、それから環境の問題、さらには例えばモビリティにとってもスマートモビリティというような考え方もありますし、いずれにしてもスマートというような我々がスマートというのは効率性というだけではなくて、ある意味での全体最適型の課題というものに対して全体最適型の答えを作っていくというのがとても重要な時代になってきたなというふうに私は感じています。その観点から言うと、まさにオードリーさんがご指摘になられたように、まず課題そのものの設定から考えたときに、人間社会そのものが一体将来どうあるべきなのかと、それはロングタームとして人間社会って本当にどうあるべきなんだろうかというようなことを考えることがまずとても重要だというふうに思うのと、それを考えたときには皆さんが同意したある方向感を作らなくてはいけないということなんだと思うんですね。みんなある方向感を目指してそのロングタームビジョンは作るんだけども、そのロングタームビジョンのいわゆるキーゴールインディケーターのようなものにして、みんなのコンセンサスが必要だと。コンセンサスが必要だということは、人間社会そのものをしっかりと我々が理解しない限りはいい価値を作り上げることができない、それがウェルビーイングにはつながらないということだと思うんですね。そういう意味では市場側の課題を我々しっかり理解し、その理解をする上では皆さんと非常にクロースなコミュニケーション、ディープディスカッションをしながらある方向感を作り上げていくということがまず最初にその課題設定の段階で必要だと思いますが、オードリーさんはいかがでございましょうか。
Definitely. I often think about democracy itself as a technology that helps the society to understand its own agenda better. Now, previously, when we talk about democracy, people think about like voting for city councillors, members of the parliament, the president, and so on every 4 years or so. But in information science terms, that's like what uploading 3 bits of information per person every 4 years. It's a very small amount of bandwidth compared with radio or television, which is a very high bandwidth broadcasting technology. But now with the internet, and especially what I call Internet of Beings, we can actually connect the signals together so that it also works on the other direction. Anyone can contribute to democracy in the here and now, even daily, simply by taking their phone and calling this toll-free number 1922, for example. Everyone can suggest new counter-epidemic measures to a sympathetic listener from a call center. This would not be possible without the modern technology of call center support and so on. I use this anecdote just to say that it changes our idea from democracy being a ritual that's practiced every other year or every 4 years into something that's continuous, that we can do every day.
オードリーさんがおっしゃられたプロセスの中で、いわゆる課題というものを自らつかみにいかないといけない、そのプロセスが加わってきたような気がするんですね。ただその価値を創造する上で課題を待ってると、待ち受けのタイプの課題解決ではなくて、自らその課題をしっかりと自ら理解するという努力がとても重要になってきてるんではないかなという気がいたします。 で我々の中ではその UN がその SDGs というものを一つの方向感として出しておりますけれども、私は SDGs の項目を見た中で、多くの部分は、人間そのものの本質的欲求、いわゆるサステナビリティの観点から考えた人間の本質的欲求というものが中にはたくさん入っておりまして、それをしっかりと理解してそれに対する価値を創造しましょうよというのが、SDGs の大きな方向感なんではないかということを思っています。そういう意味ではやはりその人間社会または人間そのものの本質的欲求またはそれによってサステナビリティが支えられるような欲求というものを我々しっかりとその人間社会とコミュニケーションを取りながら、特にインダストリーはそれを理解し、それに対するその方向感を作り上げていくというプロセスが必要になってきているなということをつくづく感じています。
Definitely, and I really love this idea that a smart governance or a smart mobility, as you put it, system is about empowering the individuals. So I very rarely talk about smart city. I always talk about smart citizens. Citizens who are smart and empowered by the industrial tools and processes. And the SDGs, they are numbered according to the most basic numbering 1, 2, and 3, and the most abstract, the most general purpose numbering 15, 16, and 17. So after the SDGs gets ratified, I change my dress code. I usually before SDGs wear black and white and gray, but after the SDG gets ratified, I often wear this color, which symbolizes global partnership for the common goals. That's 17. But it also is very concrete. 17 talks about open innovation, reliable data that can build effective partnership even across the sectors that previously did not trust that much each other. And so, for example, this is made out of upcycled denim. So it's the jeans that would end up getting dumped into some waste place somewhere, but somebody rescue it and apply design sense for circular economy, what we call upcycling. And this unifies the designers, which is a creative art sector, into the economic sector for fashion and so on, and into the environmental work sector, which takes care of this upcycling. Things that were previously seen as different silos or even working against each other, like environmental and economic value, are put by design into something that enhances all of them.
先ほど私全体最適ということへお話を申し上げましたけど、私が全体最適と申し上げているのは、今までの社会っていうのは局部最適型のソリューションで、今でもそうですけども、将来もそうですけども、局部最適型のソリューションが非常に大きな価値を人間社会に提供できてきたと思います。しかしながら特にエネルギーなんかを考えますと、あるエネルギーソースがどうあるべきかっていう議論の局部最適なソリューションだけではなくて、消費側もどうあるべきなのか、全体エネルギー全体が消費、それから作り上げる方、エネルギーを作り上げる方、ソースの方全体を含めてどういう答えをその地球全体で答えとして持たないといけないのだろうか。これは基本は国の単位でものを考えるかもしれないけども、最終的には地球全体でものを考えないと答えが出てこないかもしれない。そういう意味ではまさにオードリーさんがご指摘になられたように、我々はそのコネクティビティを持ってみんなが理解し合って、コネクティビティをベースに理解をし合って、本来どうあるべきかというようなことを全体で答えを作り上げていくという努力がこれから求められるように思いますけれども、オードリーさんはその辺の観点で何かご示唆いただけますでしょうか。
Yeah, I think countries is no longer the best abstraction to talk about these planetary forces. I mean, after all, carbon dioxide doesn't know about borders, right? It permeates throughout borders, just like biological virus and computer virus. So for these things that happens in a planetary scale, what will take it for people to realize its full externality, that's the full impact of our decisions, is only possible when there is a planet scale accountability, meaning that there must be a system that gives this full account of my participation, say, in the Bitcoin or Ethereum community. What does it mean for the environment somewhere else on the planet? And only when people are fully realizing the consequences of their actions can we truly talk about value. In a supermarket, for example, a box of cookies, there's a value, monetary value, like how many dollars you can buy this cookie labeled on it. But in Taiwan, the civic technologists for a while have been getting the evidences about the externalities, which pollutions or which carbon footprint and so on are involved in producing that box of cookies, and they produce apps that you can use to scan the same barcode, but instead of displaying the monetary value, it displays the planetary value, like maybe negative a lot. So this box of cookie is so cheap because actually our descendants are paying for it.
いろいろなものがビジュアライズされるというのはとても重要なことで、一人一人が意識をそれによって持ちますよね。そういう意味ではとてもいい仕組みのように思いますね、今おっしゃられた仕組みは。で、ちょっとこう話を変えて、またオードリーさんにお伺いしたいことが私、ございまして、それは、ICT または IT というものが、AI も含めてでございますけれども、どういうようにその我々の課題解決に将来役立っていくことになるのだろうか、またはその ICT 力というものが今後どういう力をつけることがより、大きな貢献を人間社会にできるんだろうか、その辺について何かご示唆いただけるとありがたいと思いますが、いかがでしょうか。
Yeah, in Taiwan, we believe in broadband as a human right. So no matter where you are in Taiwan, you're guaranteed this unlimited data connection, at least 10 megabits per second for just 15 euros per month. And this means that anyone is equally connected, no matter if they're in the very rural areas or remote islands and so on, and therefore participate equally into the democracy, but also universal healthcare, including telehealthcare and also telelearning capabilities, without which all the digital development will be leaving more and more people behind, people who suffer from the connectivity gaps and so on. But if we are committed, as we are with the health as a human right, if we are connected to connectivity as a human right, then of course we can say all the developments are leaving no one behind, and the technologies can then adapt to the real societal needs, and the societal needs can actually co-create with the technologies. So I believe leave no one behind in terms of connectivity, as well as digital competence, not just literacy, where people who are suffering from some issues can participate in the creation, not just buying off-the-shelf solutions. I believe these two are key to a digital democracy.
大変貴重なご意見ありがとうございます。その価値を受けるだけではなくです、価値創造に参加するという観点からもですね、平等にコネクティビティが皆さんがアクセスできるようにならなきゃいけない、その通りだと本当に思います。もう一つ私の質問はですね、DX 今盛んに日本の中でも進めようとしてございますけれども、DX のキーになるのは私はやっぱりデータではないかというふうに思います。で、例えばそのスマートのお話、スマートモビリティもそうですし、スマートヘルスケアもそうですけれども、特にヘルスケアなどはその DNA を中心としたいろんな分析解析ができるようになってまいりました。そうすると、これからどういうふうにどういうようなそのデータを取っていくのかということがとても価値を作る上でとても大切になってくるんではないか、そのスマートモビリティにとってもそうなんだと思いますね。ただ単にその現状のそのロジスティックスの動きを調べるというだけではなく、それによってどのくらいのエネルギーが使われているのかとか、全体のその人間も含めたものと人間の両方を含めたロジスティックスの最適化をするにはどういうデータを集めていったらいいのか、そういうデータの集め方というのが な価値を創造する上でとても重要なキーの機能を持つことになるんだと思うんですね。その辺について何かそのオードリーさんが今お持ちになられているお考えあったらぜひお伺いできたらと思います。特にヘルスケアなんていうのも非常に面白い領域なんではないかというふうに思っていますけれども。
Definitely. I do believe that as we are stepping into a society where more and more systems are data-driven and data-based, right? When I learned programming like 30 years ago, we write code to produce data. But now with machine learning, we collect data to produce code. So obviously, we are in a different paradigm now with machine learning and assistive intelligence. But it really pays to see where are the data coming from. If people voluntarily share the data with the full understanding that they share the governance also of the data, then you tend to get high quality data where the bias are easily detected and swiftly corrected. On the other hand, if the data is collected in a passive way without the active governance participation of the data subjects, then you get biased data, and worse, the biased data do not get noticed until it's too late. So active participation remains the key. We can actually look at a society before these data-driven database systems are introduced. These societies, of course, work on text, like text forms, right? But just as in data, the text governance and the norms around text is equally important, but we don't talk about text norms. We talk about, say, academic papers, which has its own norm of peer review and so on. Or we talk about journalism, which is not the role of text producers, but rather journalists who conform to respecting the sources, checking the sources and facts, and so on. So for each application area, there is an existing community-adhered norms centered around text in the previous generations of society. And I do fully believe that in the data-based systems, instead of talking about data norms, we should talk about the same norms that these database systems are being applied to. So if the hospitals or the clinics already have some norms around the forms of text, then when we transform those texts into data, we need to adhere to the same social expectations, but maybe more swift and more safe.
まさにそのデータの利用の仕方というのがこれもビジュアライズして皆さんがその理解がみんな平等に理解できていないとそのデータを使った価値そのものも非常にどうあるべきかという価値とそのデータの使われ方というのは本当にイコールにつながっていないと意味がなくなるということですね。いや本当にその通りだと思います。ありがとうございます。
I sleep for 8 full hours every night. And if I don't get sufficient amount of sleep, like if I only got 7, then I make it up during the day. And this is not a joke, really. For me, all the innovations happened when I'm unconscious. So during daytime, I, of course, listen empathetically and take all the sides in, but I do not pass judgments. I do not say, hey, here is a solution. I don't engage in solutionism when I'm awake. Rather, I listen from all the people who are affected by a system, and I get into their perspectives and go to sleep. And more often than not, when I wake up, I come up with a new innovation that are good enough and take care of people's shared values.
今のオードレーさんのお話をお伺いしててとても面白いなと思いましたがオードレーさんのように朝起きた時にソリューションがパッと思い浮かぶっていうのはちょっと我々にはできないことでございますけれども一番重要なのは本当に一番最初の時にもお話をいただきましたけどもエンパティーを持って自らもその境遇というか立場に立ちながら理解をするという努力がやはり課題を理解するまたは課題を設定するときにとても重要なことだと本当に思いますね。で我々人間社会またホモ・サピエンスそのものの特徴としてやっぱりエンパティーを持てるということはとても重要なその力であって、その力を我々人間社会はより一層キーンに磨き上げてそれでその課題というものをしっかりと 意識し、それに対するソリューションを作り上げるというプロセスを踏むことがやはりとても私は大切だと思います。
I totally agree. If I don't get sufficient sleep, I only have sympathy, meaning that I get drawn to the person's side when that person is speaking to me. I very easily take their side. But if I have sufficient amount of sleep, I'm feeling well, then I have the capability to also empathize, meaning that I can take their side, but also keep my own side and keep others people's side and take all the sides. And I believe that's what distinguishes sympathy from empathy.
とても参考になる言葉でした。本当にこのシンパティというよりは本当にエンパティですね。
Oh, I do so by asking this question repeatedly. For example, when we rolled out mask rationing, for a while the numbers were off, the numbers were wrong. And we discovered that there's some data bias and it's being reported by the frontline pharmacists. So I would just knock the door, walk into a pharmacy and ask the pharmacist, I don't have any idea why the numbers are wrong. If you are the digital minister, what would you do? By keep asking this question to anyone who complain about data bias, about the numbers being off, about the update cycle not being quick enough, and so on, we get this habit of everyone's business with everyone's help, with everyone's participation. When we roll out the mask rationing map, for example, we think that the pharmacies align with the population centers almost perfectly. So distributing equally would mean equity for the population because everyone is on average the same distance to the nearest pharmacy. But then people realize it's not the case because people in the rural area taking public transportation will take maybe 3 hours to get into the nearest pharmacy. Not everyone on a helicopter. So what looks like equally close on the map is not equally close for the persons that's affected. But because of this call center of 1922, people can just call and complain about it, and within 24 hours, we just come up with new solutions, not by government, but by the OpenStreetMap community. And we say, hey, the OpenStreetMap community have a better algorithm. Let's switch over to that. And then we just fix it like that 24 hours afterwards. So the fundamental problem, especially about bias, one individual is impossible for one individual to notice the bias, the blind spot, because that's by definition my blind spot. But by keeping my ears open and asking this question, okay, if you're the digital minister, how would you do better? Then people are invited to actually propose better ideas. Okay, excellent. Right. So for new ideas to get amplified throughout the society, I've identified 3 pillars, and those are fast, fair, and fun. If an idea is both fast, meaning that it allows people to quickly gather around it and suggest new mutations, new variants. It's fair, meaning that it is achieving a common good instead of extracting value, it is amplifying value. And also it's fun, meaning that people who take the care and the time to participate, to remix, get instant gratification because it's just very interesting to partake in that hashtag or in that movement. If all 3 are in the same place, then we get those new ideas that spread like wildfire. For example, when we started mask rationing, there was a young boy who called 1922 saying, hey, all I got was pink masks, but all the boys in my class have navy blue medical grade masks. I don't want to go to school because I fear I may get laughed at, I might get bullied. I'm a boy, I don't want to wear pink. Now, instead of just chiding the bullies or just doing some top-down governance stuff, the Ministry of the Health and Welfare, Chen Shizhong, the minister, in the daily press conference the very next day, wore pink himself. And all the health officers wore pink masks. And Minister Chen said, hey, Pink Panther was my childhood hero. So basically, this act of adding fun to the fairness of mask rationing, ensure that the boy feel, oh, the fun is here, right? He is the most hip boy in the class for only he has the color that the heroes wear and the heroes, I guess, wear. And in this case, it means that gender mainstreaming, far from being a doctrine, it become a fashionable thing. All the leading brands in Taiwan changed their colors pink in social media, showing solidarity, and that idea caught up like a wildfire. So it's fast, meaning that the response is 24 hours afterward, not 24 days. It's fair, meaning that it's fair to people of all gender experience and all age groups. I mean, Pink Panther is universal. And it's also undeniably fun.
だから楽しさっていうのが一つの価値創造の上でとても重要な役目を果たすっていうのは本当その通りですね。だから我々が参加することが楽しい、その価値を受けることも楽しいけども、参加することが楽しいっていうのはその人間の本質的な楽しさ、欲求のように思います。我々そのウェルビーイングでもウェルビーイングっていうものをどういうふうに定義するかっていうのはなかなか難しいと思いますけども、一つはウェルビーイングというある状態を定義するというやり方もあるかもしれないけども、一方でその何らかの価値貢献をして、周りの方からその価値貢献に対してありがとうって言われる、 Thanks って言われることがとても楽しく感じる。でそれこそが本当にいろいろな活動のモチベーションにもなっては、ウェルビーイングのあるそういう活動をしているのがウェルビーイングのある状態であるようにも私思います。
Definitely, I also believe that fun, when shared, become enjoyment. I believe it is the internet. On the internet, I can always find people who are interested in the same open research problems as I am, and I never feel lonely. Prior to the internet, because I'm a digital migrant, before I immigrated to the internet when I was 12 in 1993, I used to feel very lonely because I feel alone in my neighborhood, in my community, in my class, in caring about these deep philosophical questions. But when I got online, I feel everyone is caring about the same thing. Well, that's because I subscribe to those mailing lists and join those working groups. And so the internet allows people who are not physical neighbors to nevertheless become neighbors online. And once we join this community propel us forward. In fact, I dropped out of the middle school with the full blessing of the head of my school because I explained to her that I want to join this research group, understanding this very key but elusive mystery of why people trust each other online so swiftly. Swift trust. Why do people quickly trust each other online compared to face-to-face? And also in badly designed online spaces, why do people hate each other so quickly online? They wouldn't do it in face-to-face settings. Now this problem, although I may feel alone in my class in caring about that, is in fact being researched by active researchers in the 90s around the world and across many different disciplines. So I never feel lonely and I feel propelled by this research community.
まさにオードリーさんがそういう世界にお入りになられたというきっかけは多分すごい探求心がおありになられたということと、そのインターネットというものの楽しさというものをお感じになられたというふうにことが大きな理由になってるんじゃないかというふうに思いますけれども、もう一つ価値を作るのに皆さんとつながって価値を作るんだっていう経験もその中でされたんではないかという気がします。で皆さんがつながって価値を作るというのはとても重要なことですし、一方で一人一人の価値というものが見えてこないとみんながお互いになんて言うんでしょう、力を出し切る形にならないんじゃないかと思うんですね。ですから一人一人が自らを育てるということがみんなとつながって大きな価値を作るという上でとても重要なプロセスのように思うんですが、オードリーさんはその辺いかがでございましょうか。
Yes, I believe in the idea of Ubuntu. It's an African idea, but it's also a Linux distribution. Ubuntu means that in order to nurture ourselves, to complete ourselves, it makes the most sense if we think of ourselves as pieces of the puzzle and contributing what we can into the community and help each other completing each other. Only when this whole picture is complete are we truly nurturing ourselves. And it means that not treating other people according to some fixed stereotypes. I often say that I value your values instead of your types or classes or roles. Your value is the only important thing, and that is the spirit of Ubuntu. When I joined the internet research community, I was just 14, but people don't know I was 14. And for the people who know I was 14, they didn't really care. They didn't really stereotype me according to my age or other status.
そういう世界っていうのはとても重要な世界ですね。それができる世界を我々が作り上げていかなきゃいけないということでもあるかもしれませんね。まさにオードリーさんがおっしゃられたお互いを尊重し合うっていう観点と、それを一人一人の力、一人一人の個というものを尊重してそれを受け入れる、この2つがとても重要な、その価値を創造する上でとても重要な機能だというふうにも思います。
Yes, definitely. To me, in addition to people in the same generation who are living, it's also important to keep in mind that our descendants, people in future generations, are going to innovate even more. So instead of being perfect ancestors, I strive to become a good enough ancestor, leaving rooms for the descendants to innovate upon the work that we are doing. So respecting the future generations is also important. Yes, my suggestion, which is already part of Taiwan's new curriculum, is learning with the student, not teaching for student. The teacher must become a co-learner, and it is the student who selects their own capstone project, their own research directions. Previously, when the teacher held the standardized answers, by necessity, the student compete with other individuals in the same class, making their efforts kind of mutually canceling because they were not free to explore their own disciplines, their own directions. But if instead of treating those existing school disciplines as fixed constellations, if we let the student pick their own direction in the sky, then whichever star closer to that direction will form that student's own constellation, regardless of what original disciplines these stars, this knowledge came from. And therefore, the students will always be then mutually supporting each other because they will be joining people who are going into the same direction rather than who happens just to be in the same class competing against them. So no competition between individuals, but just mutual support toward new directions.
日本ではまだまだそこまでその教育の在り方について進化ができてないんじゃないかなと私自身は思っておりますけれども、まさにおっしゃったように、そういうその教育の在り方、育て方、だから私はやっぱり教えるという教育ではなくて育てるという教育がとても大事で、その中でどうやって育てていくのか、それはやはり個の尊重というのがやはりとても重要だと思っています。
Yes, definitely. Just as you would nurture each and every plant and flower in a garden, you would not teach them how to grow because each one already know how to grow. It is just this curational activity of making a space with sufficient sunlight and water and things like the nutritions for the nurturing. That is the important part. So the teacher, after understanding the direction that the student is growing toward, one of the most important contributions education is to serve as a co-learner in the same direction, making contribution alongside the student, not against the student. And I believe Taiwan has had many decades now, at least 20 years, of what we call alternative education or experimental education, which is now legal and supported. So anyone who want to try a different learning method are free to try it out in a group or an institution, regardless of whatever the current curriculum says. And after a couple of decades of experimental education, we take the best, the ones that are tried and to be true, like a sandbox, and it grows outside of the sandbox and takes the center stage as the national curriculum. So the alternative schooling system, I believe, serve the role of research, where the basic curriculum is like the development, it's like R&D relationship.
日本ではオリンピックがありましたけれども、その中で私大変驚いたのは、その12歳、13歳の方々がオリンピックにも参加し、そういう中でもメダルも取られると。で、何を驚いたかというと、やはりそのしっかりと努力をしながら価値を作り上げる能力を育てていくということとともに、とても若い方もそういう能力を発揮することができるんだ。ですからその教育というものもその本当に若いうちからそのまさにオードリーさんがおっしゃられたような仕組みでその育てるということでその子を尊重して育てていくと本当にいいその人間がこう成長できるんではないかなという気がします。
Definitely, and I think this year's Olympic is unique in that it changes the original motto, right? Originally, Olympic is all about getting faster and higher and stronger as individuals. But this year, it's faster, higher, stronger together, meaning that as a human community, we need to work improving this faster, stronger, and higher, not just for our individual selves, but for everyone in the community. It's a pretty large community. It's the human community.
そういう意味では我々まさにいろいろなところで価値を創造する上でもコネクティビティを重要視し、コネクティビティそのものの本当の意味合いは個の尊重というところにあって、で個の尊重をする中でお互いがこう力を補完し合う能力ということもとても重要で、それを意識しながらこの尊重をしてつながり合って、さらに大きな目標を共通して持つということが課題解決または価値創造の上では大切だと改めて思いました。
Definitely, and I do wish that we continue to work across different jurisdictions, different countries, to make sure that this mutual reinforcement of entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, people who think of good social innovations are not limited by the single country or jurisdiction, but can share their ideas through flagship platforms such as this one by NEC throughout the entire civilization of humankind. I believe that will help a lot in fostering this mutual respect, because people can see that each ongoing issue, it could be pandemic, it could be the infodemic, it could be the climate action that's needed, come from all the different sources, that this mutual support, this global planetary mutual support network is truly there. So instead of thinking that, oh, only my neighbors are able to help with me, or even only myself is able to help me, when we're looking at important data sharing regimes, data governance regime, for example, it would no longer be just about the personal and the corporate or the individual and the state, but rather about the interpersonal and the community that's worldwide.
先ほども触れました全体最適の答えを作るのにその企業のインダストリーの方もその一社ではもうできない状態になってるんだと思います。そういう意味ではその先ほどの個人がこう力を合わせて補完しながらそのある方向感に共感して価値を作り上げるというプロセスそのものがそのままインダストリーにも当てはまってインダストリーがお互いのインダストリーの価値というものを尊重しながらやっぱりつながり合ってそのある 我々の大きな方向感というものに関してお互いに共感し合って、インダストリー同士が力を競って価値もさらに高いものにしていく、そういう努力が最終的には今もちろんボーダーレスでですけれどもやっていくということが本当に全体最適の答えを地球上の全体最適の答えを作っていくでとても重要なプロセスで、まさにこれをみんなが意識してやっていくことがこれからとても求められるのではないかなというふうに思います。
Definitely, I could not put it better myself. Let us figure out this planetary mutual support before we move on to other planets, of course. Yes, becoming a good enough ancestor, it's my driving value. For each and every suggestion I make, I ask myself, am I taking options away from the future generation? Or am I giving even more options to the future generation? Am I sacrificing the well-being of future generation to fulfill today's needs? Or am I saving into the account of future generations? For each and every lobbyist who meet me, I demand that there is a full transcript or video recording of the conversation. And this changes the nature of dialogue because I often say this camera stands for the watch from future generations. And then the lobbyists start talking about the global good, the sustainable goals, and so on. And because they understand that they will be judged not by people in the same generation, but the people maybe 7 generations down the line. So full radical transparency is not just for accountability for the current government, but also to remind ourselves we need to become good enough ancestors.
という意味ではいろいろな価値を創造するという主体価値創造の主体だけではなくてその価値創造をしているのを客観的にもう一度自分自身で見てみるというのも非常に高い価値があるということですね。
Yes, the process of innovation is the main gift that we can share to the humanity. The product, well, it's limited by physics, right? We can't really duplicate it. We can't really go beyond the speed of light. But the process of innovating, even though the product may not be applicable elsewhere on the planet, if we share the open innovation process, somebody else may be able then to improve upon it. Software is unique in that it's built from thin air, in the thin air, meaning that all it takes is some mathematical insight to improve a software, and it costs almost nothing to distribute new copies of software. And these two properties together means that anyone who are affected by software is actually empowered to change the software for the better. The same cannot be said for hardware. Even though there are more and more 3D printing, the maker movement and things like that, this is more about augmenting existing hardware than creating completely new ideas of hardware configurations, which is still beyond the means for most customers. But most customers equipped with personal computer and a connection to the cloud editing environment can actually do the same development process, the continuous integration environment as the best software teams. And that means that when we are software defining the things affecting the society and so on, there's always room for democratic participation. If we do not forbid remixing of the software, that is to say, if we do not threaten to sue based on copyright or patent law or some other so-called intellectual property, if we endorse the idea of open innovation, of open API, open data, and also open source in our day-to-day operations, then it means that people who want to learn about how something works can contribute very meaningfully to the society as early as they are as teenagers. In Taiwan, for example, our climate science is boosted by thousands, maybe tens of thousands of middle school and primary schools measuring air quality using AIoT, what we call assistive intelligence, Internet of Things devices. And these devices, the so-called air boxes, contribute to a full understanding of what's happening in the atmosphere in Taiwan at any given point. And so people in those middle schools, even very young children, learn about data responsibility, data stewardship. They learn about the GDPR. They learn about how to connect meaningfully in a distributed ledger technology and things like that, which are impossible to teach, but very easy to learn once you operate one of the nodes that contribute to this data coalition. And so contribution to the data coalition started as early as possible, preferably with open source and open API software, I believe is the key to ensure smart citizenry in a software-defined civilization era.
大変参考になりました。まさに、個人がそのデータを取得するということ、またはデータそれによって、取得することによってそのデータに対して責任を持つということ、そういうことを実感するということはとても大切ですね。小さい時にそういうことを実際に行って、それを体感するということがあれば、そのデータの意味合い、データの大切さ、データに対する責任、そういうものが身につきますね。とても面白い取り組みだと思いました。
Thank you. Yeah, the same middle schoolers also fact-check our 3 presidential candidates in early 2020 as they are having presidential forum and debate. So they can call out a presidential candidate as quoting something that's not true. And by partaking in the fact-checking, of course, also mediated by professional journalists, these young people learn that even before they are of the voting age, they are an active part of democracy.
なるほど。はい、ありがとうございました。
Yes, the system integrators who integrate a system of technology to a system of society play this flagship role on top of which new innovations may grow. In Taiwan, we propose this idea of open API, where a large system integration vendor such as the NEC make the bedrock systems. But instead of talking just to the front end, the website built by the same company or a related partner, this connection is done in an open way through the Linux Foundation Open API standard. It means that for people with seeing difficulty, for example, who prefer a voice assistant, they can plug and play into the same functionalities as offered by the text-based interface on the website. It means that people who want to experience this in virtual reality can have a field day doing so. It also means that the entrepreneurs and so on can have this stage, like the Taiwan technology stage, to build upon the bedrock services and processes provided by large system integrators to benefit from the cybersecurity and privacy guarantees, but without the limitation on their innovation. So I believe this open innovation model of large system integrators providing open APIs is the best of both worlds in terms of stability on one side and innovation on the other. I have to express my gratitude for your kind donation of AstraZeneca vaccines to Taiwan, which enabled me to have my second dose and now fully vaccinated. And because of this generous dedication of vaccine resources, I look very much forward before the end of this year to visit Japan in person. I look forward to meet you in person, and till then, live long and prosper, everyone.
Orchestrating a brighter world. NEC.